Hello, and welcome to round 6 of the Pecking Order Show, a show where we talk all things Australian football through the lens of the TPO rankings. You can think of it like the FIFA World Rankings, but for Australian clubs. Jake's joining me, as always, on Skype from Brisbane. Jake, how are you going tonight?
Cody, I'm great, thanks.
Great, that's the way.
Good to be here.
And I'm doing well too, thanks for asking.
Yeah, I didn't really care.
Okay, let's get on to this week's show because we've got things to do. As always, we'll be recapping some of the weekend's results. The focus of this week's show is on the season to date in some of the national Premier Leagues around the country and our predictions, the system's predictions for the rest of the season. We'll get more into that shortly. We'll be previewing some of the upcoming weekend's games from around Australia. And guys, stick around to the end as we got a bit of a teaser for you for next week's show. I'll throw it in there now, where we'll be asking who is Australia's best ever club team, dating back to the NSL days right up until the Sydney of today. So stick around right to the end. Okay, Jake, let's get into part one, which is the recap section. We'll start with Broadmeadow Magic versus Lambton Jaffas. The result ended a 2-2 draw. TPO, the system predicted a Broadmeadow win. You guys, the supporters on Instagram stories, also voted for a Broadmeadow win and 2-2. So I guess we're both wrong on that one. But Jake, anything to say here?
No, not really. I mean, they were both actually, these two teams are ranked very closely on the rankings. So a draw, if you look at the probabilities, Broadmeadow was the favourite, but not by a lot. So a draw doesn't actually have too much of an impact on either club in terms of the rankings. So
yep.
We'll wait another week to see who comes out on top there. Sounds
good. Next game we had was Adelaide United versus Newcastle Jets. Adelaide taking that one out 5-2, they were pretty even on the TPO probabilities, but we just had Newcastle as favourite, so we predicted a Jets win. You guys as supporters also predicted a Jets win, so we both fell short on that one too. Just anything to add there, Jake?
We're going well, 0 from 2. Only that Adelaide and Newcastle, again, were right next to each other in the rankings going into this week, and Newcastle were in fourth. So Adelaide, with that win, moved back ahead of them. So Adelaide into fourth, Newcastle back to fifth.
Cool, and we both had Marconi's... I think we both had it, or I had it. Marconi Stallions versus AP Leichhardt. That was washed out. Let's keep moving on to keep this show nice and snappy. Jake, you can run through the next two, as I think they were your games.
Yeah, so the first one was Moreton Bay and Lions, and Lions got up there in what the system is saying is a bit of an upset. So Moreton Bay were favourites, about 48% chance of winning. And the supporters actually got this one right and have come out ahead of us. So supporters on Instagram picked Lions as the favourites and have done that. So Lions move up the rankings to 38th, and Moreton Bay are actually dropped to 37th. So
wow, big
the
drop.
results had them, and the results had them now neck and neck in the rankings. So we could see some more movement there in the coming weeks.
Yep.
And then the other one that I had was Pascoe, Vale and Heidelberg from Victoria. And Heidelberg were the favourites there from the TPO probabilities, and supporters also picked Heidelberg. But we're both right. Heidelberg got up 3-2, but it was looking like we were potentially going to be wrong there for a little while. Pascoe Vale went ahead 2-0, and Heidelberg in a comeback game, and with I think a red card there and another one right at the end. So played a lot of that second half with only 10 men, and it was, I think, Tom Cahill with a hat-trick for Heidelberg. So a really good win for Heidelberg, and they're looking good. And Pascoe Vale, good start to the season and until the last couple of games.
Yeah.
So Heidelberg stay 9th on our rankings. Pascoe Vale dropped to 26th, so just outside of the top 25 after that week.
Cool. Well, yeah, from 4 games then we predicted, because we scrapped the Marconi AP game, which was washed out. We only got 1 out of 4, and the supporters, you guys got 2. So you actually take on the leaderboard up here behind me. If you follow Instagram stories, I updated that earlier in the week. You guys supporters are on 5, TPO system on 4 out of 9 games. So Jake, we've got to lift our game a little bit. Are there any other results or movements in the rankings that stand out or warrant a mention?
Probably the only one, and I probably shouldn't downplay it. It's a reasonably big deal. Bentley Greens had a win and have moved up to 11th on the rankings, and that puts them ahead of Central Coast Mariners. So that's now two non-A-League teams, and both of those from Victoria, who are ahead of Central Coast Mariners on the rankings. Blacktown City from New South Wales is also getting very close to potentially moving ahead of the Mariners as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if we talk about just the top 25 rankings at the moment, Pascoe Vale, as we just mentioned, dropped out, and they've been replaced by Sydney Olympic, who had a good win over Manly United. So Manly, the last season's champions from New South Wales, have started with a few losses to get started. So they won't be happy with that.
They've had some tough games though. They've had some tough games.
Yeah, they have. And look, you know what? I won't go into any more because I think we're about to cover some of this as we look at the predictions for the league. So I'll leave it there for now. Perfect.
Well, that's part one done. Part two, let's go. So we're just going to be going through some of the NPLs that have at least had a month of fixtures. And on top of that, we'll be looking at our TPO predictions for the remainder of the season. So where we think the teams will end up at the end of the season. I'll kick it off with the Queensland NPL. So Olympic are leading the pack, undefeated after, 8 games? Western Pride do have a game in hand and a chance to move ahead of Olympic. Western Pride has started the year pretty much like they finished last year and are currently our favourites for the premiership. Strikers have played 2 less games than most of the teams, so they're surprisingly sort of further down the actual ladder at this stage, but are predicted at this point in time to finish third. It's a very tight table there, Jake, isn't it?
It is. And look, I think we mentioned it in previous shows. We've the top 4 final system in Queensland, and there's probably 5 teams that we're looking at the moment that are predicted to finish all pretty close up there. So I can see it being pretty tight for that top 4 spot, and one club will be a bit unlucky to miss out. But I guess the other one that jumps out at me is Brisbane City, and I think a few weeks ago we were talking about them having a poor start because they were 3 losses for their first 3 games. They've come back in the last couple of weeks, and they're probably the team that we are saying could catch that top 5 if anybody's going to.
Top 5, yeah.
In terms of where they'll finish at the end of the season. And Brisbane Royal Youth as well have had a really good start despite losing to Olympic. I think it ended 7-1, 6-1, 7-1 on the weekend. So up until that point, they're doing really well, and they're on 13 points. So they're up there with the top teams at the moment, but their low ranking in the TPO rankings means that our predicted finish point is further down the table.
Yeah, and I guess another thing to quickly point out, the other end of the table, Sunny Coast Fire and the Magpies Crusaders from Mackay are the 2 teams who are our favourites to get relegated to the FQPL. So enough on Queensland. Jake, you want to take us through Victoria?
Yeah, I will. Actually, one more thing on that. You mentioned Sunny Coast as one of the favourites. You look at the probability of them being relegated at this point in the season, and we've got it at 97%.
Wow.
And look, it's very early, and a few wins on the trot could change that quickly, but a few very big losses, it's not looking good for them. So Victoria, their Victorian NPL is about 5 rounds in. I say about because some clubs have only played 4. There's 3 clubs with a perfect start still, which is pretty impressive, and those are Bentley Greens and Avondale, both 5 wins from 5, and then you've got Heidelberg with 4 from 4. And as I say, a game in hand. So, look, it's no surprise if you look at our predicted tables at the moment that those 3 teams are predicted to finish as the top 3. And Heidelberg at the moment, the favourites for the premiership. And look, it's, again, no surprise given they're ranked so highly on the table so far and have had such a good start to the season. I kind of looked ahead a little bit to see when any of those 3 teams would play each other. And the first time we'll see them is in round 8, so it's about 4 weeks away in mid-April, and Bentley Greens will play Heidelberg. So, look, I can see that being a season-defining game potentially for those teams. I guess looking down the ladder at some of those other clubs, South Melbourne have started a little bit slowly from what they would probably want. 1 win out of their first 5, but because they've they are ranked fairly highly on the TPO rankings. They're predicted to pick up some points as we keep moving along and probably make the finals. And I guess at the other end of the table, like we were talking about the relegation, and in Victoria it's bottom two automatically relegated, and then the third bottom will play off against one of the teams from the NPL 2 below them. So I guess if you look at the probability of being relegated, there's a lot more teams up for that because you've got the 3 spots there that are potentially in a relegation zone. And at the moment, we're saying the Bulleen Lions and Northcote City are the favourites for relegation or direct relegation. And that
it's pretty close, though.
It is, yeah, and it's like I said, it's very early. And if you look at the actual points they've got so far, you've got teams like Dandenong Thunder who are still winless as we record this, and yet because of their TPO ranking, they're expected to finish slightly higher than some of those other clubs. And you look at Melbourne Knights, who have picked up 5 points, and we still have them predicted to finish right near the bottom as well, simply because of their TPO ranking, which was affected by a poor season in 2017. So yeah, look, it's like I say, it is still very tight. Apart from maybe those 3 at the top who have all had perfect starts, so we'll see how long that continues. And look, I hope that at least Bentley Greens and Heidelberg continue to have a really good start to the season until they play each other in round 8. That'll be a really interesting game if that's the case. Huge game.
Absolutely. Well, that pretty much does it for this show. And as mentioned at the start, we've got a bit of a cliffhanger for you. I'm going to be rolling that in just a second. But as always, guys, if you've got any questions, leave them in the comments. We've got lots of stuff in progress. We're really excited to share lots of stuff. So if you've got any comments or questions, leave them in the comments. Jump over to YouTube, give us a subscribe, all that sort of stuff. Join us on Instagram stories. Lots of fun to be had. Okay, guys, who is the best ever club in Australian football? Roll it, and we'll see you next week.